What if we told you that the man who sang Tutti Frutti had a life as vibrant and complex as his music? Yes, we're talking about Little Richard, the architect of rock and roll. Richard was a legendary singer, pianist, and songwriter who shaped popular music and culture for 7 decades. He was known as the architect of rock and roll because his music in the mid-1950s established the foundations of rock and roll. His charismatic showmanship and dynamic music, featuring frantic piano playing, pounding backbeat, and powerful raspy vocals, captivated audiences and influenced generations of musicians. Richard's expressive vocals and up-tempo rhythms also contributed to the development of other music genres, such as soul and funk. He inspired singers and musicians from different musical backgrounds, from rock to hip-hop. His music defined rhythm and blues for generations. Richard was one of the pioneers of breaking the racial barriers in music. He reached out to listeners of all colors with his music and concerts. He challenged the attempts to keep black and white people apart and brought them together with his music. Richard received many honors for his contributions to music. He was one of the first artists to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. He also joined the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He got Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Recording Academy and the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. In 2015, he was awarded a Rhapsody and Rhythm Award from the National Museum of African American Music. The Library of Congress added Tutti Frutti to the National Recording Registry in 2010, saying that his unique vocalizing over the irresistible beat announced a new era in music. He had a net worth of $40 million at the time of his death. That net worth includes the estimated value of his catalog and publishing rights. Little Richard owned a luxurious estate in Lynchburg, Tennessee that he sold for $347,000 in November 2020. As for the cars owned by Little Richard, one source mentions that he owned a Cadillac Eldorado in the 1950s, which he painted purple and had his name written on the side. He also owned a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud in the 1960s, which he customized with a gold-plated dashboard and a stereo system. He later donated the car to a museum in Los Angeles. The early life of Little Richard. Richard Wayne Penniman was born on December 5, 1932, in Macon, Georgia. He was the third child out of 12 born to Leva Mae and Charles Bud Penniman. His father was a brick mason and a deacon in the church, but he also had a side business of selling illegal moonshine and running a nightclub called the Tippin' Inn. From a young age, he started singing in church and learning how to play the piano. He had a slight physical difference that made one of his legs shorter than the other, possibly because of some complications when he was born. This affected his walk, and he was teased for his feminine appearance. Growing up, Richard was influenced by gospel singers such as Mahalia Jackson, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Marion Williams, and Brother Joe May, who had a powerful voice and a wide vocal range. Richard wanted to be a preacher like May, who was called the Thunderbolt of the Middle West. He also learned one of his signature screams from the Clara Ward Singers. Richard went to Hudson High School in Macon, where he did not do well academically. He learned to play the alto saxophone and joined the school band in 5th grade. He also worked part-time at the Macon City Auditorium for Clint Brantley, a promoter of secular and gospel concerts. He would sell coke to the audience during the shows of famous artists such as Cab Calloway, Lucky Millinder, and his idol, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Personal life. Audrey Robinson, a 16-year-old student from Savannah, Georgia, met Richard around 1956. She was not a fan of rock and roll, but she and Richard became close. Richard admitted in his 1984 autobiography that he arranged for her to have sex with other men, including Buddy Holly. In October 1957, Richard encountered Ernestine Harvin, his future wife, at a religious rally. They started a relationship that year and got married on July 12, 1959, in California. Harvin claimed that their marriage was happy at first and that they had normal sexual relations. She said that Richard's fame made life hard for her and that was why they divorced in 1964. Richard said he neglected his wife and that his sexuality was also a reason for their breakup. Finding refuge and developing his style. A pivotal moment in Richard's life came when he was 13. His father kicked him out of their home because of his effeminate behavior. This event forced Richard to find refuge with a white family, the Hudsons, who owned a club in Macon. It was there that Richard started performing and developing his flamboyant performance style. As he grew older, his exploration of his sexuality became an integral part of his life and music. Richard identified as gay, and his music often reflected themes of freedom and individuality, resonating with many who felt marginalized by society. In the 1950s, a time when homosexuality was largely stigmatized and misunderstood, Richard's boldness in expressing his sexuality was groundbreaking. His gender-bending style, combined with his electrifying performances, made him an icon in the LGBTQ+ community. His fearlessness in owning his identity was a beacon of hope for many who were struggling with their own sexual identities. The struggles and conflicts. However, Richard's journey wasn't without its struggles. Throughout his life, he grappled with the conflict between his religious beliefs and his sexuality. He frequently oscillated between embracing his identity and denouncing it due to his religious convictions, a struggle that was reflective of the societal pressures of his time. Health problems and death. After finishing Lifetime Friend in October 1985, Richard flew back from England to appear on the show Miami Vice. He then had a car accident in West Hollywood, California, hitting a telephone pole with his sports car. He broke his right leg and ribs and injured his head and face. Richard started having trouble walking in 2007 because of sciatica in his left leg. He had to use crutches. In November 2009, he had surgery to replace his left hip. He resumed performing the next year, but his hip still bothered him. He had to use a wheelchair to get on stage, and he could only play while sitting down. In 2013, Little Richard suffered a heart attack while at home. He was able to recover with the help of his friend and associate Charles Glenn, who performed CPR on him and called 911. After the heart attack, Little Richard's health began to decline. He had hip surgery and suffered from sciatica, which affected his ability to walk and perform. In March 2020, Little Richard contracted an illness that he never recovered from. His lawyer Bill Sobel said that the cause of death was related to bone cancer, which Little Richard had been battling for a while. Little Richard died on May 9, 2020, at the age of 87. He was surrounded by his brother and son in Nashville, Tennessee. He was mourned by many fans and fellow musicians who paid tribute to his legacy and influence. Professional career. Imagine a world where the pulsating rhythms of rock and roll never existed, a world without the exhilarating, electrifying energy that this genre brings. We owe a lion's share of this musical revolution to a man whose flamboyance was only surpassed by his extraordinary talent, the one and only Little Richard. Little Richard's journey to stardom was an uphill battle against poverty, racial discrimination, and a relentless pursuit of his dreams. His foray into music began in church, where he was deeply influenced by gospel music, setting the foundation for his future career. In the early 1950s, Little Richard's career took a turn for the better. He signed a record deal with RCA and released his first single, Every Hour, which was a modest hit. But it was his switch to specialty records in 1955 that truly ignited his career. Here, he recorded Tutti Frutti, a song that exploded onto the music scene and instantly transformed him into a sensation. The late 1950s saw Little Richard at the height of his fame, releasing iconic hits like Long Tall Sally, Good Golly, Miss Molly, and Lucille. His flamboyant performances, complete with his trademark wails, screams, and charismatic stage presence, were groundbreaking. He was not just playing music, he was performing it, setting a precedent for future rock and roll artists. However, at the peak of his career, Little Richard took a surprising detour. In 1957, he decided to leave the music industry and enroll in a theological school, becoming an ordained minister. For several years, he focused on gospel music before making a triumphant return to rock and roll in the mid-1960s. Over the decades, Little Richard's influence permeated the music industry. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Elton John all confessed to his significant impact on their music. His flamboyant style and dynamic performances blazed a trail for future generations of musicians. Challenges. Little Richard's career was not without its challenges. He battled substance abuse, faced criticism for his androgynous appearance, and struggled with his sexuality. Yet, through all the trials and tribulations, Little Richard remained a steadfast figure in the world of music, never compromising his unique style or groundbreaking approach. Little Richard left behind a legacy that transcends time and genre. With his groundbreaking music, flamboyant stage presence, and fearless personality, he not only shaped the face of rock and roll but also challenged societal norms and expectations. Little Richard's legacy. Little Richard's legacy is immense and lasting. He is widely regarded as the architect of rock and roll and one of the most influential figures in music history. He helped shape the sound and style of rock and roll with his energetic performances, flamboyant outfits, and catchy songs. He inspired many other artists such as the Beatles, Elvis Presley, James Brown, Bob Dylan, Prince, and Michael Jackson, who covered his songs or emulated his style. He also broke racial and cultural barriers with his music, appealing to both black and white audiences and crossing genres such as gospel, blues, soul, and funk. He left a lasting mark on the world of music and culture with his talent, charisma, and innovation. Thank you for watching. For more exciting content like this, subscribe and click on the bell notification.